Hello everyone and welcome. Today's video is all about adaptation. So if you're a GM running a homebrew campaign, have you ever considered turning your material into a novel? If your answer is yes, this video will be a massive help. In addition to writing a Tudor-inspired one-shot, I'm also writing a novel. For this reason, I've decided to do something a little different and make a crossover video to help aspiring GM novelists turn their campaigns into a book. If you're playing D&D or any other tabletop role-playing game, you've likely included some fantasy elements. Because of this, I'm going to use some examples that are mainly relevant to the fantasy novel genre, but whatever I talk about applies to all genres, to a degree. But before you put pen to paper, it's important to consider your target audience, as this will affect the tones and themes you'll cover. Granted, some of these would be addressed within your game, but hear me out. With campaigns that have run for several years, there's likely a web of interwoven plots, with some being more fleshed out than others. So when writing a novel, consider what parts of the game complement each other and what plots can come together to form a cohesive and tight storyline. To get you started, it might help to think about subgenres. Within the fantasy genre, there is high fantasy, urban fantasy, dark fantasy, and so on. Now your game may touch upon several of these subgenres in some detail, but sticking to one and fleshing it out will help your novel appeal to a specific audience or readership, if that's important to you. Of course, there are mixed genre novels that do incredibly well, such as romantasy, a combination of romance and fantasy. So once you've decided on your subgenre, it's time to familiarise or refamiliarise yourself with similar books. For example, if you want to go down the high fantasy route, Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter are popular examples. When reading these books, be analytical, pay attention to how magic is used and what rules it abides by. How rich is the world building? And what themes do the stories address? Also, are there any plot twists? If so, how are they executed and how far into the story do they occur? Next up is point of view. So one example that springs to mind is the Curse of Strahd campaign. If your homebrew is a similar gothic horror, whose point of view would you take? Is your protagonist a Strahd-like vampire villain, or would they be similar to Tatiana or Strahd's brother Sergei? Choosing a point of view is critical to your storytelling, as it will shape the reader's experience and expectations. For example, if you're choosing Sergei, does he observe his brother's descent into all-out narcissism? Does he try to escape with Tatiana before their doomed wedding? Did his mother try to warn him about Strahd before they left their ancestral home? If, however, you're choosing Strahd's point of view, is he an unreliable narrator, and is his cruelty revealed bit by bit? Do you want to trick your reader into rooting for him when the whole time he is a monster? Or perhaps, do you want to base your novel on Queen Ravenovia, Strahd's mother, and flesh out a plot where she tries to protect her younger son Sergei from his out-of-control elder brother? What I'm trying to demonstrate is that there are different stories to tell from each character's perspective. The Curse of Strahd is a bird's-eye view of the general campaign or story, but there are at least 4 more stories to tell should you choose to zero in on one of the central character's point of view. Another reason choosing a point of view is essential early on is that it often dictates the world building. Going back to our Strahd example, he's a spoiled prince, so naturally a lot of the book may revolve around a palatial setting or focus on the battlefield when he was out warring. If we were to choose Tatiana, she lived a very humble life. Her experiences and how she would describe the world would be very different to Strahd or even his brother Sergei. World building sets the fantasy genre apart as writers create an entire universe with its own system, laws and history. But keep in mind not to get too carried away. You don't want to overwhelm your readers with too much lore. A good way I like to incorporate lore is to loosely flesh out the plot and work backwards. That way I don't get too bogged down in creating systems and magic rules I will never use. It also cuts down on the research time as well. So far we've briefly covered choosing an audience, point of view, and world building. Next up is character development, which is one of my favourite parts of novel and game writing. Some people think of a character arc first, then flesh out the plot around it. However, my novel began with a loose plot, and the character creation was secondary. Of course, as I went on, the characters informed the plot, and vice versa. There are many ways to develop a character with a bit of depth, as some of your NPCs may have intriguing backstories that even have room for a bit of growth. You could also take inspiration from your players' characters too. After I've loosely put together a character and worked out how they fit into the plot or storyline, I want to check if they have a want or need. A want is primarily plot-driven, so if you take Walter White from Breaking Bad, he wants to make enough money to pay for his cancer treatment. But as the series goes on, He becomes engrossed in living this alternate life of crime, but what he needs is going unfulfilled. Perhaps he needs to feel secure in himself and understand that he has achieved his full potential, whatever that looks like. His hubris keeps him in the criminal underworld, and this is his fatal flaw or downfall. After you've got an idea of a character's wants and needs, you can check if it all makes sense by using the hero's journey or story circle. I often use this technique at the end of writing to ensure I have a solid character arc. However, it can also be useful at the beginning of your writing to keep you on track. I tend to write on the fly with a basic outline, so I don't plot too heavily initially, as I end up exploring new avenues and ignoring my outline halfway through. I won't discuss the hero's journey or story circle in this video. If you're interested, I cover Tasha and Strahd's hero's journey in some detail. I'm also planning to cover more character arcs as time goes on, as people seem to like those, so do subscribe to be the first to see them. So now we move on to plotting. What keeps a plot alive is conflict. But what is conflict? Conflict can be external. For example, a character versus a supernatural. In this example, a protagonist may have made a deal with the devil to obtain success or riches. Alternatively, an internal example of conflict is character versus self, which is usually tied to an unmet need. Perhaps our character is a bit like Walter White and has an overbearing sense of pride or arrogance they must overcome. Plots work best when characters experience both internal and external conflict, as this drives the story forward. Next up is outlining. Now this can vary greatly between writers and is highly individual. I find novel outlining quite similar to game writing, as both games and novels have particular beats they need to hit to progress everything along nicely. In addition to the hero's journey and story circle, you can also use something like Freytag's Pyramid. Again, I won't go into too much detail here, as I use Freytag's Pyramid to plot Vecna's rise to legendary Lich God. Like all my other videos, I'll leave links to them in the description, so you can easily find them. In the past, I've used books like Save the Cat, but I like to get everything down and then refine my ideas as I go. I find trying to make everything hit a specific beat or structure too overwhelming, and I often retrospectively check everything once a draft is written. Also, people often hit those beats intuitively, especially if they read a lot of books or watch plenty of films. Last but not least is drafting. For me, outlining and drafting are the same process. My advice with drafting is the same with world building and outlining. Just keep going. It's all about getting ideas on the page and failing fast. It's very easy to fall into the trap of reworking paragraphs and doing heaps of research when coming up against a problem. If a scene or chapter requires some lore that will take a while to research, make a note and return to it later. I've often found that some scenes that require a lot of specific details got cut, so don't put too much pressure on yourself in that regard. If you've enjoyed this video, please do consider liking and subscribing. I'm documenting my own game writing journey on YouTube and have a playlist dedicated to the different scenes I'm creating. So if you want a more detailed how-to guide in terms of how I approach scenes, conflict and dramatic questions, those are very helpful. Anyway, that's all for today folks, and I'll see you in the next one.